Well, welcome back. This is Daily Encouragement, and I'm Pastor Brad. And today we want to continue in our series about the effects that sin has both in and on our lives. Now, so far we've talked about how sin corrupts our relationship with the Lord. What that really looks like is that on our end, it makes it much more difficult to encounter and engage the Lord. It drives a wedge between us and God. And oftentimes it even causes us to shade the character of the Lord, maybe even in a negative light, because as we sin, we see God differently. And so there is a corruption that happens in our relationship with the Lord. The second thing we talked about was the fact that sin has a way of corrupting our relationships to each other. And really, ultimately, what this looks like is we have a distrust in other people, and oftentimes their motives are in question because we don't know how to sometimes relate to each other and honor each other in a way that is pure and holy. And so here are some of those effects, and we're going to jump in again looking at the story of Adam and Eve in Genesis 3 as they deal with sin for the first time, because it is in the immediate aftermath of what happened there that we really see four areas, and we're working through these day by day, but four different areas where sin will have an impact. And it doesn't matter if the sin is exactly related to those specific areas. It just will have an impact into those areas by nature. And so again, this week, what I'm trying to call us to is an understanding that sin is bigger than just an oops, I made a mistake, but it has very real consequences in our very real lives, especially as we relate to God, to others, and then as we'll find out today, as we relate even to God's creation. And so I want to jump into Genesis chapter 3, and we're going to jump right down to verse 17, and we're going to read what that says. So if you want to join me, please do. Again, Genesis 3:17. It says, "Then to Adam he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and have eaten from the tree about which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat from it, cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you will eat of it all the days of your life." Now, the first thing I want to just point out is that God actually calls out Adam. He calls Adam out on the carpet, because remember yesterday he was trying to blame his wife for the reason why he did this. But God says, because you listened. See, he's saying you're accountable for your own actions, brother. And because you listened and you did this and you made the choice to eat of that fruit as well, here's what's going to happen. And he lays out the fact that he said, cursed would be the ground because of you. In toil you will eat of it all the days of your life. And so what we need to understand is all of a sudden, Adam's relationship to God's creation changes, where before God's creation provided for Adam and Eve. They did not need to plant or do anything. The ground produced fruit that they could eat. So, fruit and vegetation was provided for not by their work, but by the creation itself. Well, that changes in this moment. And now what we see is, because of that change in our relationship to God's creation, what happens is turmoil and labor become a part of man's reality. And something that we need to understand is that all of our sin brings turmoil and labor into our lives. And it is because of our sin that we have turmoil and labor to begin with. You see, God did not create us for work. Work is a result of our sin. And we need to be clear and understand that, ultimately, God's plan was for us to live in a harmony where we did not need to work and labor and toil. But the results of sin is always work, labor, and toil. And we see that even sometimes in our sin, it causes us to have to work hard to be able to either restore relationships, or even sometimes for people to even try to hide what it is that they're doing. But sin will always bring turmoil and labor into our lives. That is an effect of the changing transition of our relationship to God's creation. And so with that being said, again, I would call you to question the things that you're doing and to take stock of your own actions, because we need to understand, again, that sin does not just go away, and sin doesn't even just have the immediate effects that it might have in the area in which we have sinned. But sin will always lead us to struggle with the Lord. It will always lead us to struggle with others. And it will always lead us into the place of turmoil and struggle in labor. Would you guys close with me for a word of prayer? Lord, we thank you that, again, you are good and you are long-suffering with each one of us, that even though we sin, that you work through that with us. But Lord, we cannot hide the consequence of our sin. And Lord, we recognize that a part of that is the labor and turmoil that comes because we no longer are in harmony with your creation. And Lord, we just pray that you would help us again to take stock of our own lives and our actions, and that we might submit those things before you so that we might live and be restored back to a healthy way. And so we thank you today. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, thank you again for joining us. Remember, help us get the word out there. Remember to watch, like, and share these videos. We really do appreciate when you do. Until we see each other again, remember to be smart, be safe, be wise, and wash your hands. We'll see you again tomorrow. Goodbye.